So I'm delighted to be here with Barrie Williams, otherwise known as Whizzo.
Oh.
But you're probably more commonly known as Whizzo. A racing driver, I think, that's known primarily for driving historics and classics and some legendary cars.
Oh, yes.
Been racing since the 50s, I believe.
This is absolutely correct. I started in the late 50s. I've still got my competition licenses from way back, from 57, 58, 59. But it's not so much that. I've never wanted to be a world champion, a Grand Prix driver. I've just wanted to be involved in the sport and enjoy the driving and enjoy the camaraderie and the friendship of all the other drivers and the team, all the team spirits and all that. That's basically what I love doing.
And you're known as having a never say die attitude, and people have said that you have a great ability to squeeze the maximum out of the car to take it home. And is that something that...
It's a very nice thing. I earned this bit of a reputation because I learnt all about engineering, or I've forgotten most of it, but I went and did my normal apprenticeship in engineering at Davy Brown Tractors because I wanted to be at Aston Martin's. But because I failed all my exams, I never really got to actually into the main Aston Martin factory, but apart from that, building engines and things like that. But my whole attitude was understanding why it all worked. So my father was a very good engineer in the car side and then into other things. And he taught me a great deal, driving and everything, of course. Because he used to race motorcycles before the war, so he knew the feelings and I think he passed it on to me. And I was able to then use my engineering experience, which I picked up as I went along, and put that to good measure. And I've been able to, I suppose, yes, old cars that shouldn't be running are still running at the end of the race probably with me because of that knowledge that I picked up. It's just keeping something going, I suppose. It does help.
It's almost that mechanical sympathy, isn't it? And I know that you have a reputation for driving very fast, but also bringing the cars home. And I was talking a moment ago about knowing when actually it's better just to stop and go in the pits rather than stop when it blows up or whatever.
Well, I know, because I always look at it I've always had to worry about the finance, as we always do in life, and somebody's got to pay the bills, and if it goes bang, and I can't pay the bills, so I've got to try and bring it, let somebody else make it go bang, or somebody else crash it, or whatever the case may be. It's a very dangerous sport. Things can go wrong, mechanical things. It's not like running. If you're doing a marathon or something, you can set your pace and you can start running. Not that I ever do anything that's frantically like that. But the idea is you can set along, and the most really can happen is perhaps a shoelace can come undone. But in a racing car, a wheel can come off, which is... You're a passenger then.
In 1964, I believe, you were the first person to internationally win in a Mini Cooper S.
Yes, I was very lucky to have. I was rallying a Mini Cooper, and occasionally it was on its roof in a ditch somewhere, but we got it going. Then I had an unfortunate accident on the road, which was not my fault, funny enough. And I broke my pelvis and ribs and things and knocked myself about a bit, actually, and I was in hospital. And the Mini Cooper S was introduced. This was 1963, or very early 63. And the magazines, and one reads all the magazines in hospital, as you do. And this Cooper S came out, which was better than I'd ever had before. It was a Mini Cooper. This one had brakes, and so I jokingly ordered one without even thinking from my hospital bed. And they said, oh, it'll be at least 8 or 10 weeks before it comes through. I thought, fine, by that time I can sort out something, sell my old wreckage or get an HP deal going or something. And about 3 weeks later, the phone rang and said, your new car's arrived. Oh, ups daisy. Anyway, we got the Cooper S, and a friend of mine my co-driver bought one as well, and between us we rallied, and When mine broke, we used his. When his broke, we used mine. But then all of a sudden there was the Hereford Motor Club boys. They all got together and said, why don't you do an international rally? I said, oh, good heavens above, can't do that, it's international. And he said, no, there's the International Welsh Rally, which is taking place. Why don't you get an entry? So we got an entry, and we were very well prepared, like toilet roll in the back parcel shelf and torches in the pockets. Very well organised we were, yeah. And we set off, and my co-driver, John Griffiths, was very, very good, because motorsport is teamwork, and rally is very much teamwork. There's no way would I get into a car with Sebastian Loeb and be driven like that. I know he's perfectly safe, but to be able to sit there and tell him where to go, and those famous words, flat over brow, well, how does he know there's nothing over the brow? Anyway, my co-driver, we were young and brave then, and it was very thick fog. And if he said turn right in 50 metres, I turned right, irrespective whether there was a road there or not, but invariably there was. So we did quite well. And at the very end of this event, then it was all in the forest and rushing up and down through the trees like madmen. And then at the end of it, they said, oh, by the way, you're very tired. And I said, yes, very tired. But you better wake up. Why? Because you won. Oh, my goodness me. And then it all started. And of course, it was the International Welsh Rally, which was supposed to be held in 63, but it was postponed into January 64 because of the snow. Nobody could get to Cardiff. Wales was forgotten for a couple of weeks, and it suddenly came back to life. And we rushed off and did this rally in January, and it was a few weeks before Paddy Hopkirk, that well-known Irish driver, who won that handicap rally in France. They called it the Monte, wasn't it, I think? Yes, it is the Monte Carlo. Anyway, we won our international rally. We were the first, and it's been quite fun, actually. I've always tried to remember that, and it's been part of my mini driving. I used to love minis, and I still love minis. And minis are really quite the part, and to rush around in a mini around Goodwood or something like that, and do quite well it's a great fill-up, you know. Oh, yes. And we're all part of a team. As I said before, motorsport is teamwork, really. And one of the greatest people who influenced me in that respect was Michael Schumacher. Now, he is a team player. I know he's having a hard time at the moment, but he's not really. He's doing a very, very good job for a man of his age, as I say. But, he's a team player, always has been a team. He made Ferrari back again. He's working very hard with Mercedes with a car that isn't quite right yet. It isn't the new one, that it will be, but he's not going to be around to do that. He's going to retire. But that was that teamwork. And also, you mentioned Jackie Stewart and the safety aspect now. We just lost a wonderful man, Sid Watkins, the doctor, the prof. What a wonderful man he was. And he if a big toe was hurting, he'd look at it and go, oh, that's nothing. And all of a sudden the pain went away. He was that sort of a person. I've suffered from back problems from my early accident in the 60s, 62. And, but I think, well, so have other people. I'm just lucky at I'd be 74 next week. How about that,
You are incredibly inspiring, and, people love you for what you do. I think on the track as well as off the track. And you've talked already about kids and bringing them on. What would you say to people who are perhaps, that have been inspired by you and perhaps want to do something different in their life or want to, make a shift or a change? Because you have a phenomenal...
Well, I feel if you have something out of life, put a bit more back in. If take something out, but put a bit back in. I love helping young drivers. I don't do enough teaching and tuition, and I hate all this word coaching and all that. I think it's all wrong. because it's all money, 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 money. I think if one can put back in, I will sit down with young people, young up-and-coming drivers, or even older ones, and I've been out with a lot of quite elderly people, and they've enjoyed my input into them, and they've gone a little bit quicker. Now, the young ones, I say to the young ones, look into the future, look ahead. You know, don't be afraid of it. You know, it's the old story. Anybody getting in a go-kart these days, the go-kart weighs so much, the driver weighs considerably more than the go-kart. So the driver is in charge of the kart. Now you get into a car, the car is considerably heavier than the driver, so the car is in charge, is trying to be in charge, but the driver must be the boss of it. It's like having an angry dog on a lead. You must be able to train it and bring it back to heel. But when it's a pup, it just lets itself go and you go with it. I think that we as racing drivers, I call myself a racing driver because I still race quite a lot and do quite well actually. I think, you know, I've been very fortunate to have had some very good cars and some good drives. But one can help others, and that's where I love doing it. It's helping, putting a bit back in what I have out. The people who are the most important are the people who are watching. We are in a show. We're putting on a show, really. And I think people like Lord March, who managed to put on a race meeting called the Goodwood Revival, it's an incredible show. But the trouble is, if you do well, you know, you're in the magazines for a long time, you're well known, all that. So you tend to get sort of what we call Goodwood specials, you know, and that's not fair, really. I don't think it's going a little bit too far in the situation of cars and drivers. Some drivers drive beyond their ideas and means and experience, and that's difficult sometimes. We see it.
It also makes it more interesting for the audience.
It's a show. It's a huge show, isn't it? And I was racing a Morris 1000 a few years ago, and I was able to throw this thing along great big slides, and it had the grandstand standing up. It was tremendous. And I was racing a Ford Galaxy a couple of years ago, and there was another Ford Galaxy, and I had a bit of a mechanical problem, which I knew was going to curtail my race. But I thought, if you're going to retire in the lead. So I did take the lead on the last corner of the first lap, and we came round both Galaxies side by side, and we were confronted by a grandstand of people getting up and abandoning ship because it looked like two bungalows were about to hit them. So that was the fun, but I trusted the other driver, he trusted me, and we got round the corner. But the crowd didn't know that, but they were waiting for anything after that. But as I say, it's a show, it's a show. But we are racing hard, believe me. But up to that little level, we can just step back a little bit, perhaps. Yeah, I think self-preservation has a lot to do with it as you get older. I raced that wonderful car, the old Tojeiro Jaguar of Dick Skipworth, a car you know very well. Designed by a man who was a sort of Adrian Newey of the old days. And, you know, we have problems with this car now. It goes very well for the first few laps, and then the handling deteriorates. And of course, it's taken us ages to find out why, because we've moved the fuel tank to the back because it seems safer. And as the fuel load gets down, the car gets very wayward. So it's good for the first half of the race, and it's pretty difficult to drive for the second half of a race. But of course, John Tojeiro, who designed the car, he designed it with fuel tanks in the side, and the handling of the car didn't change too much. So we're always trying to develop the car, and we've probably developed it the wrong way, but at least we're still keeping these old cars in the same way as they were, but they're going so much quicker. The engines are so much more powerful. And the modern tyres, modern Dunlop racing tyres are so much better. The brakes are better. I wouldn't say the drivers are any better, but the whole package is a lot better. Yeah, sure, yeah. It's old cars, and they've all got character.
Yeah, huge character.
You know, I talk to some of these cars, I really do. You know, and then I talk to myself.
But I think that's really interesting, and I took myself off on a challenge last year, learning to ride a motorbike and stuff. But I remember, was it John Surtees that said,
yes,
you have to be at one with your motorbike.
Absolutely.
And if you're at one,
oh, yes.
you will connect with it.
Yeah.
And therefore, you'll know, as you say, where the edge is, where the
Yes.
boundary is, where the extra bit is.
But, you know, we mustn't take the false way around these things. I had a particularly bad time with my with some tummy problems I had at one time. And one of the greatest riders I ever knew was Barrie Sheen. Now, Barrie was an absolute character. He gave me a ride on his scooter through the crowd at Ingliston once, and he pinched a young lady's backside as we went through the crowd, and she turned around and hit me. And she thought it was me that did it, you see. But, you know, he was that sort of a character. But on a motorbike, he was part of the motorbike. Now, I was having trouble with my tummy, and I was talking to him, and he says, I'm having trouble with a lot of pain at the moment, not knowing how much pain he really was in. He said, take one of these tablets, it'll help. I'm sure the vet had given them to him, you know, because I took this tablet and the pain went away and I didn't half go well. And so did he that day.
Obviously, in everyday life, in motorsport, we have those days that are more challenging. There's hurdles, and I'm sure that, you know, there's cars that aren't quite doing the right thing, or there's people, I'm sure there's owners that are more amiable than others. So.
Hey, you're out there in a racing car, you're human, we're all human, we all have bad days. We've got to have a bad day, a good day, a bad day. Everybody's like, even, maybe we as historic historic drivers, and I've raced all sorts of cars, as you know, but historic cars and things, they're quite physical to drive because we've always got a lot too much power and no grip at all and very little brakes. So we've got a lot of mental involvement as well as sort of thinking. But we haven't got this huge, in Grand Prix racing and also in later modern GT racing, what we call G-forces, which is absolutely extraordinary because the body takes a huge battering. In a Formula One car, if you're doing, say, an example, you're doing 150 miles an hour and you take your foot off the throttle, it is rather like doing an emergency stop in an ordinary road car. Your head goes forward, everything stops very, very suddenly. And that's,
I've seen them often got.
Yes, now the Formula One drivers have got very big necks because they have to try and get their neck muscles to hold. A head and a crash helmet is very, very heavy, and you haven't got a lot of control over it because it is the heaviest part of the body. So the longer the muscles, the better the muscles and all things. That helps a great deal. But of course, Formula One drivers have a bad day. The drivers you see on television, they have bad days. But, you know, it doesn't affect them so much as the sort of the mundane ones like ourselves who are driving cars that aren't really safe. We don't have those G-forces. We don't have those huge physical problems which they have.
The safety around you that there is with more modern cars.
Yes.
Safety measures and
absolutely, yes. But they're in another world compared to us. But, you know, I think adrenaline is a wonderful drug. It goes around the body, and if you're having a bad day after the first corner, you feel pretty good anyway, and you're at it. You can have mechanical days where things just go wrong all the time, and that can get you mentally as well. If you know, you think if you're not, you know you can do it. If the car can't do it, that is a bit of a frustration. So frustration does come into it.
How do you overcome that frustration? Because that can be quite
a good one this year. I came into the pits and driving an AC Cobra, and I stopped and I said to the mechanic, I said, let's keep it to a nicer day. Let's keep it for another day. I said, it's actually not very well. No. It's bleeding everywhere. And it didn't smell very well. Very good, and that was the car. But anyway, the whole story, you know, sort of, yes, it is frustration because one knows one can do it, but he knows that there's a younger one coming along who can do it better. But so the big thing is try not to get carried into an area which you're not really fully with, just because that young guy is that much better. There's always somebody better than yourself, and you never stop learning. So you know it's always a learning. Whatever you're doing, you're learning. Like yourself, like I'm sitting here in front of a camera and talking to you, and I think, oh my goodness me, you know, mother could see me now, there'd be a terrible row. You know, don't swear or anything, will you? No.
So what's next?
Well, I don't really know. I'm not one of these that sits and waits for the phone to ring. It is very nice, you know. I still wait for it to ring, believe me. I'm very fortunate people keep asking me to drive their cars, and I now drive the most strange vehicles, like a standard Vanguard. Did you ever heard of a standard Vanguard racing? But it didn't matter. I drove it at Goodwood, and I had a huge, lovely race with Tim Harvey in an Alfa Romeo. But huge respect between two drivers with great, you know, experience. Side by side all the way around Goodwood. Mad, absolutely mad.
You've talked a few times about, you know, the mental attitude about things, and I think there are some people, and you look at people in all sorts of sports, I think, and often I think you can tell those that have got a slight shift and a slightly different mindset that says, actually, I'm going to do this, whatever, come what may, is difficult along the way. I'm going to find a way through it or around it.
One of the greatest things you get out of any sport, and we saw it in the Olympics, it's standing there on the podium with the Union Jack and the national anthem being played. It is a fantastic feeling. It really is. And I saw people in the Olympics crying, and I know exactly how they felt, because fortunately I've been in that position in France in the 4-hour race with Lord Beaverbrook, Maxwell, and Jeff Lister. We won a big 4-hour race in France. It was a 4-hour race and in a Porsche, and we won it. And we were British, and we were up there, and it was absolutely wonderful.
I think people are hugely impressed by what you do. You're obviously very well loved for what you do in racing. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's been hugely inspirational spending time with you this afternoon, and I thank you so much. It's been amazing.
I've been very honoured to sit here and just chat. It's been lovely. Thank you.